Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I'm Marcus Blake, and we are speaking with director Shaun Michael Colon for the Oak Cliff Film Festival and the premiere of his film about podcasting, The Age of Audio. Welcome, Shaun. It is a pleasure. It's been a long time since we've interviewed you, so it's great to have you back.
I appreciate you interviewing with you again. It's been a while. I mean, I've seen you at a few festivals in between
Over the
times,
years, I
but
know. So,
but it's been a while since I've been in the director's chair, if you will.
well, I do remember you talking about this film pre-pandemic, and I'm glad to see that it is finally done. It's out, and people get a chance to see it. So, all right, we're going to dive right in. What started the idea, your obsession with podcasts, and wanting to do a film about it?
Well, I'd been an audio engineer for a long time, so I always had an affinity for audio. And then I think, like a lot of people, kind of nerded out to Radio Lab and This American Life when it was on the radio, and then got a love for audio storytelling at that point. And even in the early days, like I did a documentary called A Fat Wreck's punk rock stuff. And a lot of those bands and Mike, they would do proto podcasts where it was, they put like them talking, people chatting about stuff, and they just put it on their website, like a MP3 file on their website. So not exactly a podcast because it wasn't the distribution the same way. But the idea of downloading an audio file and listening to it, that was early on. I didn't really think of it that way. And then, I would say it was probably This American Life and this is still pre-podcast, but This American Life, they had their catalog on their website.
Yeah.
And you could, when the first iPhone came out, you could go to the website. It would play it as like a quick time. So I got used to like starting to listen. And as, I found out more about podcasting, and those are the early days. This is far, far away from the concept of doing the documentary, of course. And so I had already kind of liked that concept. I'm someone who picks up a lot from just listening to things. And I found that was one of my favorite, I guess maybe because I'm ADHD and I'm always moving and doing something. So sitting down, audiobooks are great, but having that in my ears as I'm able to move around the world or do things I really enjoyed it. And then fast forward a few years, we were working on a Fat Wreck documentary that premiered at Diff, and we got to chat with the puppets and all that stuff. We did puppet reenactments for the first movie. After that movie came out, what happens when you make a documentary, what happens is everyone has an idea for a documentary.
Right.
Or they a lot of pitches, like, oh, you should do this. And I was trying to decide what I was going to do as a follow-up, and I ended up doing something that was music adjacent. It was this documentary about this punk rock band and really about their support systems. And we were working on that documentary. The name of the band was Wilhelm Scream.
Yeah.
And we kind of followed them for a few tour dates. And one of the tour dates was in New York. And the same time the band we were following was playing, or the same night, another band was my favorite band, Propaganda, was playing. And a mutual friend was opening the show. His band was opening the show, and he knew we had the recording equipment. So he's like, hey, you can come to the Propaganda show. Would you mind filming our set, our opening set?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, man, great. I was going to go to the show anyway. This is cool. On the way there, he messages me and says, hey, my uncle's going to come to the show. And I'm like, well, that's cool. Okay. He goes, my uncle's Ira Glass, from This American Life. So that was already a weird convergence of things, punk rock and Ira Glass. I ended up hanging out with Ira Glass just randomly, and we ended up chatting a whole bunch, and it was really, really great night. A few days later, one of the people I was interviewing for the documentary was this guy named Dallas Taylor. He runs a podcast called 20,000 Hertz. It's all about sound. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. He's starting a YouTube channel now, Dallas Taylor. You should definitely check him out. he had done an episode on the sound of Wilhelm scream. So that's why we were interviewing him. When A Fat Wreck had come out, I had reached out to another podcaster, Roman Mars of the podcast 99% Invisible, fairly popular podcast. And he was a punk rock guy, so he had done the pull quote on the back of the A Fat Wreck documentary. And so I kind of had that. So I'm talking to Dallas, and I tell him the story about meeting Ira Glass, and he's like, dude, you know Roman Mars, and now you know Ira Glass. Why aren't you making a podcast documentary? And I was basically like, screw you, dude. Why'd you say that to me?
Quit giving me ideas.
No, I have to do that now. And I'm already working on a documentary. Like, I can't do 2 documentaries. But basically, that's kind of where the idea came from. It was from Dallas Taylor. It's his fault. I blame him. 7 years later, he actually will be at he's going to do the Q&A for the festival.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to be there to do the Q&A and help facilitate that. So shout out to Dallas Taylor. I blame him for everything. But yeah, so that's where he kind of put the pieces together for me. And so I reached out to Roman. I didn't initially reach out to Ira. I waited till we kind of had the ball rolling, but I reached out to Roman and said, hey, if I did a podcast documentary, would you do an interview? He's like, of course. And then what happens is a month or 2 later, I'm at South by Southwest. Mm-hmm. We're in Dallas. Austin is not too far, so usually just hop down there and hang out for a little bit and see what's going on and go to a few parties and meet people. My sales agent for A Fat Wreck was there. He's like, what are you working on? He's like, do you have any new stuff you're working on? And I told him about the project I was working on with the band. He was like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, anything else that's kind of bubbling up? And I was like, well, I have potentially in my back pocket, I have this potential podcast documentary. I already got a yes from somebody that's kind of well-known within the industry and is well-liked. And when I told him that, he's like, dude, I could get money for that. I was like, oh, okay, great. That's
well,
exciting.
now the stars have finally aligned and you're going to have to do this.
Well, and then the next day is a big podcast network meetup at it's the PRX meetup at South by Southwest. So I go in, and it was open to the public. I go in, and within 20 minutes, I pitched. At the time, it was one of the head guys at Stitcher, Radiotopia. What was it? How Stuff Works Network. All these people, all these kind of big hitters were there, and I kind of said, "Hey, I think I get money." And Roman said yes, and they're like, "Oh, this is a great idea. Here's my number. Here's my card. Yeah, whatever you need." So I'm like, "Whoa, this thing really wants to be made." I end up going to NAB. If you're not into the film industry, that's where a lot of camera gear and lenses and all kind of broadcast stuff is. And I ended up running into a guy who had a punk rock hat on, really nice camera. And I was like, hey, we ended up talking, and he's like, oh, you did the Fat Wreck documentary? I love that documentary. He's like, oh, I worked for Red Camera. You know, and if you're not a filmmaker, a Red Camera is like this cinema camera, very expensive. He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, we're doing this documentary. He's like, oh man, I can get free cameras. You got to fly me out there. I was like, okay. So I think that was I want to say January, and then March happens, and then by May we're shooting the documentary, essentially just laying down the thing. And so that's kind of how it just kind of started, and it wanted to really go in the beginning. It really did.
Well, I was watching the film, and I was trying to think back, because I have been doing podcasting in some form or fashion since early 2000. Well, technically late 2008. Because I come from politics before I did entertainment, and had a political podcast that had a decent following for a number of years. And my co-host at the time, my best friend that I grew up with, brought it to me, and he's like, well, there's this thing called podcasting. And you're like, well, I don't know what this is. It's like internet radio, and anybody can do it. In my mind, being a movie guy, I'm like, are we like Christian Slater and Pump Up the Volume? Is this like a pirate thing? And he's like, no, it's actually legitimate, but cool reference too. We're going to be just like that. And I don't think people realize, that podcasting is, one person said in your doc, it is very democratic. It's anybody can do it. It's like self-publishing. The means to do it is there, but being able to earn money and grow it and all that, that's the trick. So, and that's why you had companies like Blog Talk Radio and other things that's, morphed into Spotify and stuff like that. But I don't think how many people actually realize where it really came from? What is that genesis?
And I think that was something we wanted to do with the movie is provide a little history about where it came from. I think some of the things, I've been living with the movie for so long, so this stuff is just second nature to me. And as we've kind of started to show screeners to some podcasters, that's been, a lot of people didn't know where it came from and kind of some of the genesis of what were the technological things that had to happen to make it feasible, but also some of the early people who started messing with it. And the early days it's just tinkerers. It's just really just people just kind of messing around with this kind of little, oh cool, oh well, okay, you can send on the internet, you can now digitally send these. Okay, cool. But what happens is, and I don't want to spoil too much, but basically, there's someone who's, blogging is kind of a proto.
Right.
There's an aspect of blogging where, because that was also something that you're like, oh, you can just publish yourself on the internet. You don't even have to go through any gatekeeper. You can just, I'm going to write something, I'll put it up on the website, and then people will find it. People will find it. But then how do you get, when you have something new, how do people get that? How do people know that it's been updated? And so all these kind of things start falling in line with blogging that eventually kind of leads like, well, if you can do it with text, why can't you do it with audio?
Well, I don't think people also realize how much of a game changer RSS feeds, from websites to blogs to podcasts, all of those things made it easier. And then, YouTube, where everybody can record a video and put it up on something and people can find you and all of that. But you have to start. There is that place that you start, and it's kind of the Wild West until somebody comes along and kind of organizes it in a way.
Well, and I think what we're able to do with the film is kind of show a little bit of those Wild West days.
Yeah.
Leading into when it did become, for lack of a better term, corporatized, and when the money came in and the structures came into place. And really, there are a few times in history where you can be an early adopter and be there in that moment when that shift is happening. And although we don't go deep into Joe Rogan, he's definitely one of those, obviously we talk about a little bit about Joe Rogan, but he was one of those guys amongst many comedians that were really just kind of screwing around. They were like, oh, here, I can just make this. And they weren't like, this is going to be a career. This is going to be my, way to make $100 million. That just wasn't even in. It reminds me a lot of like early punk rock stuff, like early punk rock bands, or like, or people who are in that phase where they're like, I wasn't getting into this for a career. I was getting into it because I just thought it was fun, or I was like, oh, I can just do this, and no one's telling me that I can't, so I'll do it. And I think indie film was like that, early on when cameras got cheaper. It used to be that you had to have, a whole, like kind of like you had to have a whole broadcasting tower to do radio. It used to be you had to have film cameras and all these things. And then for a brief period of time in indie film, there was these early people that got into it because they could, and a studio couldn't tell them they couldn't.
Yeah, see, I kind of look at Joe Rogan as like the George Lucas of podcasting. Is I didn't get into it. I just wanted to tell stories and make a film. And then you make one of the biggest films of all time that catapults you, and then you have to deal with studios, and it becomes so much bigger. And now Joe Rogan has something big enough that can literally influence an election.
Well, and it can define what the medium is. Like if you say podcasting to the vast majority of people, unless they're, someone who really is into podcasting, they're going to think, oh, it's podcasting is, a guy on a microphone talking to another person on a microphone, and having a discussion, which it totally is. And actually, it's kind of the way it started. I think what we try to do with the movie is show that it's that 100% without a doubt, but it can also be lots of other things. And I think one of the things that we try to show is like, it is a medium. So like you can write a book about anything, right? A book is a medium. You can write a pamphlet about, of vitamins, or you can write War and Peace, or a great novel. Like it's really what can be done with it. And I was hoping with the movie is that to show like what the breadth of that could be, and what it was like a little bit before it became professionalized. Because I mean we're living in a time where it's it's become anyone can still do it.
Right.
But your chances of breaking through are dramatically less because now there's way more people doing it, but also those people that got into it and were able to make, catch that just before it kind of hit, they were able to solidify themselves. And it's really hard. That top 10 really is really challenging to see a lot of, you don't see a lot of churn.
There's a little bit of luck that goes into, getting to that part, getting to that, with the following, the corporate sponsors and all of that. And then when the market becomes, so saturated that everybody's trying to do it and break in. And I'm going to move over to this in a minute with my next question. But I do want to point out that at the time of this interview, the recording of this interview, June 20th, 2025, today is the day that I learned that Adam Curry was involved from MTV. I didn't know that. That's something that I did not know. That I had to watch this film to learn. It's like, wait a minute, what?
That's great. That's great.
I think for me, it's so much of, I don't know how it was invented. I just know it's at a point in time, there were websites where anybody could have a podcast, and that's how I got into it.
Right.
And when I
got Adam Curry, like he, I mean, in a lot of ways, there's many people were involved, but he, in a lot of ways, was one of the co-inventors of podcasting.
Yeah.
But he had many tech companies. Like he's built like when he pivoted away from, we couldn't go into all this in the movie, it's so much to cover, but really he kind of was interested in what the internet was doing when he was working at MTV, and was able to parlay, I think, some of his money he made from that and started investing in technology, and was really, like I said, it wasn't just, and still to this day involved in, there's a thing called podcasting 2.0 that I wish we could have got into a little bit more, but we really found that if we got too bogged down in the technical stuff, like even RSS, we had a much more in-depth explanation of RSS, and as we did testing, people were like, "Oh, it's really dragging here." So we could have had to like trim it down.
I just tell people now that if you have a website for any kind of media thing, there's a plugin for WordPress. that's what you need. Yeah.
I mean, RSS, you say it, a lot of people don't even know what that is. And what I hoped we were able to do was give enough of a technical description that people understand that this little piece of code that was written by Dave Weiner, essentially. And like I said, they're not strictly the only people involved, but essentially Dave and Adam. Like that little piece of code allowed for mass distribution of blogs, and that the internet was sitting there ready for that. It was ready for something like that to come along, because it was these, it's already distributed. So what's the mechanism that allows for that? And once that happened, it unlocked this thing. I mean, and even we talked about YouTube. even if, it's not RSS specifically, and I think they've started to integrate it a little bit.
Sure.
But the concept of subscribing, and that you're gonna be getting, like, whenever that person puts something new, you get access to it.
Yeah.
And that concept, even if YouTube isn't exactly on RSS, that concept still was there for them to piggyback off of, if that makes sense.
So Ronald Young Jr., how did he kind of get involved in this? Because he's basically your narrator throughout this documentary. Host. You're right. Let me call myself the host of this documentary, which is brilliant. And I love how you kind of did that. That it's like I'm watching a documentary, but it's like it's in a podcast format while you're learning.
Yeah, I really wanted to try, and it was overly ambitious maybe, because we really wanted it to. I wanted it to integrate some of the little tropes and production styles that you would do in a narrative podcast, or I don't know if you caught, there's a host read ad in the middle of the movie, and Ronald drops his Patreon at one point, which when we were recording his voiceover, basically I said, no, say your Patreon, because that's what you would do as the host. If you're, if you have a podcast, they drop those little things in there. People are used to that if they've listened to podcasts. And if you're not, it's just like this funny little moment. And also, I think it's great to get a little promotion for his Patreon.
Oh yeah.
But we wanted to, like, the sound design. This Hannes Brown did the sound design, some scoring and the mixing, and then we have some music from Breakmaster Cylinder. Breakmaster Cylinder's music proliferates a lot of different podcasts. They provide music for lots of different podcasts. So we wanted to, like, pull in those elements. So for someone who is familiar with the space, there's a lot of little Easter eggs for them to catch. I see what they did there. And for someone who's not, it doesn't feel like a regular documentary. It should feel like something a little bit different. And that's something that I wanted to do, because documentaries have become so popular. And there's, not to say we're the only ones, there's lots of people who've tried a lot of experimentation with documentary, but there is a kind of a formula to a lot of documentaries you see. And we wanted to try and merge that with this other kind of thing to get something, hopefully that's a little bit different and feels fun. And the idea that your subject is also your host was kind of a weird thing that we were trying to do. We needed, I originally had that. So over the course of making the movie over the 7 years, we've had a couple other subjects that I followed and then had to drop out for any kind of reasons. Having a pandemic in the middle of the filming definitely shifted. I'm not one of those people who's like, the pandemic changed everything, but the pandemic changed everything. And it's like, when I think about it, it really did have a pretty big impact, because all of a sudden, you have a momentum going. 2019, 2018 is when we start filming, like B-roll essentially. We get some funding. We have enough funding to do a real big push in 2019, which is the year that we land in New York and start filming the day that Spotify announces that they bought Gimlet. $230 million, shot across the bow, as it's said in the movie. And really, we're filming when that kind of escalation is happening. Right. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic hits and everything kind of shifts. So Ronald actually didn't, it's only been about a year and a half since he's been involved. I knew that I wanted to have a host.
Right.
Like from the beginning, I kind of had that concept, but originally I had an idea that it would be someone else. And then when Ellen Horn's a producer that came on. She's also a professor at NYU. She co-created Radio Lab with some people. So she's, for 25, 30 years, she's in audio storytelling, teaches it, at NYU. We started talking. She came onto the team and was basically like, Ronald has to be the host, right? And I was like, oh, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And so
Kind of
we're
agree.
very we're very lucky with Ronald. I had been hearing about Ronald and his podcast. Wait for it, in the rumblings in the kind of the podcast community. He was starting to get, I think it had debuted at Not I think I know it debuted at Tribeca, and he had.
Right.
There's some other podcasters that I respect a lot that were talking and did some crossover episodes, and I was like, oh, this Ronald guy. And then when we had in 2023, we were very lucky to get an Austin Film Society grant. And it was at kind of a low point for the movie. It had kind of, I think momentum had kind of slowed down. And when that happened, I was trying to get everything back up and running again. And I reached out to the subject we had been working with for about 2 years. And they were basically like, hey, we're out.
Yeah.
They had been kind of the length of time had changed. And I think the thought process had changed. And so I was actually kind of in a little bit of a worrisome spot. And I had when we got that grant and I was trying to ramp things up to kind of get the movie back up, I had put on our website, they were looking for independent podcasters. I knew I wanted it to be an independent podcaster because I wanted to showcase independence, like what it looks like for an independent to try and make it through this in anything. And when I had like a spreadsheet and I was looking through the submissions and I see Ronald Young Jr. He submitted to our thing. Oh my gosh, I got to reach out. And so I reached out. We ended up connecting, and like I said, it was kind of a kismet kind of thing. Not that I'm glad anyone would drop out of the movie. It's really, to be honest with you, it's really tough when you work with someone for a couple of years, and there's resources spent and time and editing to try and craft a story around any particular subject. But it's like most things in life that seem like a bummer at first, and it really is probably the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah.
When that happened and Ronald came on, we were hitting him just as he was hitting this upswing, this pretty big upswing.
Right.
Like coming from Tribeca, getting signed with Radiotopia, like basically having an agreement with Radiotopia, and then just as we had agreed to have, he was going to work on the movie with us. New York Times top podcast, Vulture top podcasters to watch, and then getting nominated for the Ambi Awards, multiple nominations.
Yeah.
So we were really able to like capture a moment in time, which I think really serves the movie pretty well because most of it is historical, going back to like Adam Curry and Dave Weiner, even like the stuff with Ira Glass. And it's really like what happened back then. And with Ronald, it felt like there was a person you could connect to, a personal story you could connect to, which I thought was important. But also we were able to be there for actual things happening. And so that felt like the movie could feel a little more cinema verite rather than just be talking head the whole entire time, which I really wanted to try and eliminate as much as possible. So it was really a very fortunate thing that he wanted to be a part. I'm a big fan of enthusiastic consent to like, yes, I want to be involved in this. And, it's something that worked for him. It's something that worked for us. It was mutually beneficial. And we were really lucky to run into Ronald, man.
Couple of observations about him. I think his journey, especially him talking about this is what he wanted to do. This is his career. This is in that struggle to get stuff funded, be able to make a living doing it, all the stuff that you have to do. It's almost like he's the PBS podcasting, all the fundraising, everything that you have to do to kind of stay there. And it got me thinking. There are those that's their career. That's what they do. Okay. You get actors and comedians that have transitioned into podcasting. They have found sponsors and stuff. And then there's people like us that's like, we enjoy what we do. It's not full-time supporting us. We all have jobs. It's a chance for us to have another medium at that nerd show for us to geek out. Or when we're mad about something, we need to vent about it in a podcast format. Like last year in Star Wars and Disney and the Acolyte, or we get really excited.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you got out of politics. Turns out.
Oh, no.
Nothing more political than Star Wars.
I know, right? But then again, but but this is a politics that we very much enjoy, and we did our huge podcast about Andor and how it all ended and all the buildup. And it's like I don't know if I could write as well an article about that compared to four of us geeks talking about it and what we love, having grown up with Star Wars. So you get those people like us that's like, this is just one thing that we do. We're not out to try to make money. We're fueling our passions. And that's really kind of how that nerd show even started back in 2012. It was just a project that I took on of, I'm out of politics. What am I going to do now? And then people were arguing on my Facebook wall for days about Michael Bay doing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And I'm like, podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also what's great about podcasting is that it doesn't necessarily require you to make it a full career. No. I think that Ronald, it shows how challenging it is if you're going to go that route, and what it really can take to, even with like hitting the highs of getting acclaim and getting, some higher level, really doing at a high level, how even then it's extremely challenging. And I think that for me, I feel like anything you make, you put yourself into it, right? And I feel like seeing the way Ronald, his challenges, I felt a kinship to it, especially being an independent filmmaker, which it's not my full-time, it is my full-time, like as far as hours are concerned, but like as far as money, like there's not a lot of money in independent film. It's not something that was even planning on getting rich from by any means. Right. But it is trying to raise money and get all those things, get the things to be able to make the thing you care about. I felt like I would see what's going on with Ronald, and I was like, man, I feel you.
Well, you talk about it in the film. Making art is not necessarily going to make you rich, but it can fulfill you from an artistic standpoint. And that's
I like to say, my heart is full, but my bank account is empty.
Well, I always tell artists this: having been a writer for 25 years, and I'll probably never be on a bestseller list or anything like that, but I love telling stories, and I will continue to do it. And if I make some bucks doing it, great. But there's a great quote by Molière that writing is like prostitution. At first you do it for yourself, then you do it for a few friends and family, but eventually you'll do it for money. And I think that's art for
friends and family.
I don't like, but I love how you go from starting and then it ends up in this. It's like, and sometimes you do get that gig where you have to get paid. It's not what you want to do. Every actor does it. Directors do it. I wrote a biography for one time for 10 grand, and it was like, I didn't really care. It's not my thing, but I got paid 10 grand for it. And no, this is not an interview where we take phone calls.
Caller, first long time listener, first time caller.
Yeah. But anyway, he is, like I said, he is the quintessential great story of the highs and lows of it, and I think kind of perfect as the host of this. The other thing is, because of the way you did the film, which is absolutely brilliant, you can literally just listen to it. I mean, all of the images are great, but you can listen to it and still get those stories. And
that's great. That's great. When I was truly ambitious, I wanted you to be able to really listen to the movie. Like, essentially, the only place where it fails us is knowing who's talking.
Right.
Like you could definitely listen to it if you've watched it once, and you kind of, or if you have an idea who these people are.
Right.
Because what you would do in a narrative podcast, you would have the host kind of break in for a second and say, and here's Ira Glass, right. Or or Julie Shapiro from such and such, and you would have these little basically tagging who the person is with an audio. And we actually had cuts where we tried to do that, but it gets really clunky real fast when
Yeah,
you're trying to watch it.
and that's
But
understandable. I can totally see that.
but yeah, the idea with the sound design and the music and that's why I see it as a hybrid of the two, because we tried to do those things where possible, where it made sense. And we tried, like I said, the film, we worked on it, we worked on it for about 7 years. I would say over the last 2 years and over the last year and a half in a really, really intense way, there's been a ton of editing, like just a ton, like
Yeah.
just so much revision after revision after revision, iterate, which is, from what I understand, how, This American Life and many of those great narrative driven podcasts, that's how they get there. They iterate, and they're just constantly trying to make it better. And we've gone through so many revisions. And that was one of the great things about working with Ellen, is she brought in that podcast production, like the techniques
Yeah.
and the way that we attacked it in that way. Similarly, we had like basically a transcript of the entire movie, and we would go through and cut stuff out and do another one and to do another one and then do another one and move things. But it was done on basically a transcript, and then I would adapt what we did on the transcript and into the edit, basically.
Do you feel like that at some point you might release like each individual interview, like in a full interview format?
I think, we did over 70 interviews, so that would be a lot of interviews.
That's called a YouTube channel.
Well, I mean, I would love if you never know how things are going to be received, and I would love if there was a good reception for the film. I would love to parlay Age of Audio into a YouTube channel or a podcast series, where we could explore some of the things that we wanted to make the movie. I think the movie is about an hour and 22 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, just, it needed to be breezy, and it needed, so we really were very thoughtful about what needs to be here. Well, like, what needs to be here. And we killed a lot of darlings, a lot of little fun stories that I would have loved to remain. There's a lot of fun little things that I came across that I would have loved to, but we kept asking ourselves, that does this serve the story? Or are we getting hung up on something? And if we did our job right, the movie should feel like you're constantly.
Well, if you look at it as this is your introduction into this whole world. This is a great 90 minutes of telling you a history, introducing you to podcasts, things you didn't know. Okay. But there's always more content. You have that option. That's the great thing as a documentarian, with all the footage you shoot. You have the option of turning it into a Ken Burns style series and
4 hour.
Yeah, right. And don't get me wrong, I love that. His Civil War stuff is great. I watch his baseball documentary series every year at the beginning of baseball season.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, that's my way of kind of pumping up, like, baseball season is here. And there's always something that I'm kind of learning, because there's so much. So there are those options with people you've interviewed and just this world and those stories. But you're right. It's about what's the best format to do that in. For this film,
we wanted to be a fun watch, and for people who we wanted to serve. You make something, you're trying to serve multiple different audiences. Kind of like I was saying before, it's like there's a lot of little hints and little Easter eggs for people that are podcast fans that have been listening their entire life, and like it's their main source, and they've been following these guys forever. But we also want it to be accessible, and I think that's a lot of what Ronald brings. I think with that great laugh he has, and that it's someone that you can sympathize with. So even if you don't care about podcasts, you could hopefully connect with what Ronald's trying to do and what it means to try and do something, and do something challenging, whether that be podcasting or music or creating a news channel, or when you're trying to make something, you're trying to do it, essentially yourself without the backing of a major corporation. It can be, hopefully that's where someone who just stumbles in at the film festival because they missed the screening for the other movie, and they came in and they said, "Oh, what's this Age of Audio about?" And they're like, "Oh, okay, this is interesting. This is," and it didn't get too inside baseball that I feel like I'm being like it's not for me, you know, and that was a challenge. There's a lot of stuff that we had to kind of peel away and exclude because it felt like it was like, is this going to push out someone who's we're trying to bring in, if that makes sense, in the service of just, doing stuff that we like, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll admit too, I'm being a little selfish and a little jealous. I would love to see that full interview with Kevin Smith. I remember you telling me years ago that you were getting to do that, and I'm like, that's awesome. So, I know that there's a bigger interview, and I can just imagine all the things that you guys talked about.
My only downside of showing full interviews is that you hear how much of an idiot I am.
No. Your little pop-ins here and there.
My first interview with Ira Glass. Oh gosh, the guy was very gracious and patient.
Hey, trust me, I get it. But then again, when you're doing interviews, and that's the hard part from our side, is like they tell you, well, you only have so much time. Like, I'm going to need more time. There's so much. And in fact, when Kevin was doing press for the re-release of Dogma, and we got screeners, it was one of those like, well, we're trying to do that, but you're going to have like 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm not doing a 5-minute thing with Kevin. There's nothing that we can talk about that he'll give me sound bites. Okay, we're nerds. We're going to need 30 at least. Okay.
Well, I think I had 25 or 30 minutes with him, and he definitely talked in sound bites, and in the best way. Like, I mean, he came prepared. Yeah. He came prepared to give me what I needed, and there were times where I would try to redirect. It was like, just let me do my let me do my thing here. I mean, he didn't say that, but that was kind of the implication. I
know.
Like, listen, guy, I got this. You're good. I'm going to give you exactly what you need. And he did. He gave us so much of what we needed. I mean, I would, and I'm being facetious, of course. I would like to show that full interview. I think Kevin had so many more things to say. Not things you haven't heard sometimes before, because he does a lot of podcasts. Right. And he's talked about podcasting quite a bit. I think the stuff with his first advertiser, I'll put it. I think that was the main thing that I had pitched him on about being in the movie.
We won't spoil it, because I think people should discover it, but that was something I found absolutely hilarious. And the movie that it comes from is actually one of my favorite Kevin Smith movies.
Oh, that's great.
Even though it is predictable and you know what's going to happen, I'm like, but it's just fun. Okay.
It gave us a good entry to talk about podcast advertising as well, and a lead in it. And I just like the juxtaposition of something being a little now, having Ira Glass comment on it was hilarious as well.
So all the years that you've been doing this, you've obviously been introduced to more and more podcasts and people who have started, in the last few years and all that. Are there some favorite podcasts of yours now?
Man, that's a really tough question. Because I listen to a lot of podcasts, I like regularly, but a lot of them I've gotten into. I mean, really, one of the things the film talks about is there's been a decline in the narrative podcasting investment, and really the popularity of a lot of those highly produced narrative-driven podcasts who really dominated the charts up until maybe about 3 years ago. It's really become habitual for me, where most of the podcasts I listen to, I like the Filmcast, which I listen to weekly. I even contribute to their Patreon, so I get their after darks, and I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, but a lot of these are weekly, or daily podcasts that I find myself being. Most of my listening habits have shifted, and I don't. this is someone who really adores the highly produced narrative podcasts. That was really my diet, probably for a good chunk of my podcasting listening, and really it's become the habitual ones for me. And I don't say that it's just a shift of what's happened in, I think, overall, and I think that's what when you have something that comes out every week, you start planning it's like, even like YouTube channels are like this.
Yeah.
Someone's just dropping that YouTube that new video every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and so all of a sudden you get acclimated to that, and that becomes your diet now. And because you're listening to those things, you're not listening as much to those other things. And so like I listen to a lot less This American Life than I used to. I probably listen to a lot less 99% Invisible than I used to, where I, at one point listened to every single 99% Invisible episode and then went through it again. There is something that's shifted in me personally, but I think it's an industry shift, and that's where the advertising dollars is. And you could say, is it because those are not, is it because those podcasts are not getting the funding they used to get, and so they're not on that same cadence they used to be? Or is it because that other thing has kind of filled that space? So I like the tech meme ride home is a big one for me. I listen to it probably every day. I'm a big fan of the Verge cast. I'm looking here. The Town. I don't know if you listen to The Town.
No.
Matt Bellany, he does The Town.
I have before. The one that I have really kind of gotten into just because of this industry, and being such a huge fan of Smallville, is Michael Rosenbaum's Inside of You.
That's a good one. Yeah.
How we transitioned into it, and just the guests that he got to come on board. I mean, it's always, I've met him and Tom Welling before at conventions, and their panels are always great. And, them talking about stuff of Smallville and little inside and stuff. And then, but him interviewing other actors and just things that you didn't know. Like the other day, I finally caught the interview that he did with Edward Furlong from Terminator 2, and I think he actually did it last year, but which is interesting now that Edward has been like 5 years sober and where his life is now.
Right.
And talking about, really getting personal on something. So I find that a little bit more fascinating without it being a Barbara Walters special or something.
I think also I can shout out, what is it? Why am I spacing on it now? Empire Magazine.
Yes.
Empire Magazine has not so much their main podcast. I subscribe to their spoiler specials.
Yeah.
Where they interview the directors and they'll talk about the films or the episodes. I should be watching more of your stuff, Marcus, because you're right in my lane. You guys are right in my lane. I have to listen to the episode about Andor because I'm a huge fan of Andor. I also listen to the Q&A with what's his name, with Goldstein. He does he talks to a lot of the writers. He talks to Tony Gilroy a bunch and like a few of the other people. So I definitely love diving into that. What's another big one for me is I don't know if they're called competition, but there's one called Phase Hero. It used to be called the Phase Zero podcast. It used to be a comicbooks.com podcast, but then the comicbooks.com got bought out by a conglomerate. Yeah. And then they just basically after one of a Comic-Con or something like that, they basically just stopped all the podcasts essentially. It was really brutal what they did to those guys. Saw
someone that I didn't even realize had a podcast. We were covering a Star Trek convention last year, and it wasn't a really great convention. There wasn't a whole lot of people, but we had more time talking with everybody, and it was mostly the cast from Strange New Worlds. Nice. But I had never met Sirach Lofton from Deep Space Nine. I didn't know what he was doing these days. And we were just chatting. this and that with a group of people, and I asked him what he was working on, and he's like, "Well, I'm mostly a dad, but I got a podcast called The Seventh Rule, and we basically review episodes of Deep Space Nine, and then we go to other shows." Like, what? How did I not know about this? So I started listening, which is funny because during the pandemic, when we were all home, everybody started binge watching shows, going
Mm,
back and watching stuff, and my crew was like, because that was the first thing I did during the pandemic, um, was subscribe to every streaming channel known to man, and said,
yeah.
I will cover that. That's You're with us. We have streaming, and everybody started going back and watching Star Trek.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And
when it hit Netflix. I mean,
yeah,
this is even before.
yeah,
Yeah.
before
Like,
Paramount Plus, before all that. So I went back and watched Deep Space Nine, which has never really been one of my favorites, but I wanted to go back and watch it because I hadn't watched it since it was first on. So I started listening to his podcast, and it was like, wow, so much stuff that I did not know about that show, and behind the scenes. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then,
it enhances it. It enhances it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would say a lot of times I listen to like a movie review podcast or TV show review podcast. Like sometimes I just watch the show just so I can make sure I can listen to the podcast episode.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm like, okay, I got to get through this. Now I can listen to the episode. That's what I like. It's almost it really enhances it. I mean, you talk about Andor, like the discussion around Andor, and then revisiting Rogue One, and like,
Yeah,
and then listening to a bunch of people talk about it. Like that is something I think I probably enjoy the most right now is that synergy between
yeah.
TV shows, entertainment, and then listening to like people that I think are smart and funny, like disagree about it or agree about it, or
Well,
and poke holes in it. I love that.
who is it? Jenna Fisher and the one the actress who played Angela on The Office. They have a podcast where they talk about episodes of The Office and behind the scenes and stuff. Her last name is Kinney, and I'm drawing a blank on her first name, and I'm always kind of terrible about that.
But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's another great one. And so I think these kind of podcasts where you are really getting into those behind the scenes of your favorite shows, movies, and stuff. You're right. It absolutely enhances it. You may not make a lot of money. It may not be a career, but it adds something special to those things that you love.
Yeah, I think I think it's almost, and it's interesting how big podcasting is now. It's really, I mean, I think our movie might have been a little too late because people were like, yeah, we know podcasting.
Yeah, but no,
uh,
I mean, but it's beginnings and where you are now, and how in the seismic shift from corporate stuff to where it is now, and how is, like, if you do video on a podcast, is it still a podcast? You know, uh,
that's a discussion.
yeah, we switched to video because of Zoom, and that's how we wanted to do things. And
But
um,
people don't want to. People want to watch. I mean, in the film, we don't go super in depth on it, but we definitely address because the film is really geared toward audio first
yeah,
podcasting. Because I don't. I think to define everything kind of moves and shifts, and I think for what you guys do. And for a lot of interview podcasts or like where people are chatting, I think it really does enhance it. People like to
yeah,
watch it. But if you're making a narrative audio documentary, it doesn't make any sense because you're trying to create a sound space in there.
right,
So I think the film advocates for that. Not to say if it's a video, it's not a podcast, but it says like there should be a lane for audio first,
right.
theater of the mind, and because there are things that you can do with sound once you add a video component, it
Yeah,
changes it. And that's really funny to say as someone who made a visual documentary about podcasting.
but with all the mediums of where you can put your content, from YouTube to Spotify to Apple and all that, you can make it both, and that's the great thing about it. I still think it's important that if you're going to do a podcast, you're right. You need to focus on the audio. It's the conversations that you're having, and someone good with a board with sound effects or whatever. But then again, for the people that are visual that want to see and listen, they have that option. So I think that's kind of the evolution of
Yeah, I think
how we start.
I think it all under that umbrella of podcasting. I think audio storytelling has its own little space where
Sure.
you don't need visuals. Visuals can take away from the experience.
Right.
And then there is a space for, I mean, the discoverability on, I'll tell you this, even when they make a audio first or audio only narrative story or highly produced audio story that's an audio story, audio storytelling, they still make a visual trailer to put on.
I know.
Because the discoverability on YouTube, which is RSS, we talked about it earlier, and it's really great and what it did, but it does have drawbacks, and it doesn't have. Podcast has always had a discoverability problem, and the one thing that YouTube does is, and this is widely reported, is one of the biggest place people listen to podcasts is YouTube. That's where people will find these things, and it's also the TikTok now, and little clips on TikTok, clips on Reels, and there's some speculation that Mark Maron, I don't know if you've heard, Mark Maron's getting out of the game after 16 years later this
Which
year.
I'm glad you got that interview with him for this, because I feel like that's a very important interview to tell this story.
Yeah, we were very lucky to have him be involved at any capacity. But I think that some of the speculation is like he doesn't want to. What he does, his podcast, if it had a visual component, he probably wouldn't get all the guests that he would have gotten.
Yeah,
because some people, and I've seen this in once you introduce a video component, and especially with certain stars and people that are high profile, they could go into his garage and just have a chat with Mark, and that just in their minds be just him and Mark.
yeah.
You add a video component now, oh, maybe I want to have a makeup person. Okay, what am I going to look like? What am I going to wear? All of a sudden, all these different things are considerations. What will now shift that conversation into a place where it may not be able to go into the same places, because you're not just sitting in that garage, just you and Mark. It's you and Mark. And even though realistically they know that other people are listening, it's now that you're on camera, it really has a way of, it's like quantum physics. You change the outcome by viewing it, the observation side of it. And it was, again, I think all arguments are valid about having video. I think it's an important factor. I think that if you're trying to grow a podcast today and you're not doing a visual component, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. But I think the kind of conversations you're going to have are going to be slightly different than what you could get if you didn't have a video camera there.
I always joke around that when I'm doing yard work, I've got my Bluetooth headphones on and I'm always listening. And I love listening to comedians and stuff like that. But I've listened to podcasts too. And somebody made a joke like, man, there should be a dedicated podcast of just something you can listen to when you're doing yard work.
What's really funny is I use YouTube the opposite. What I listen to, I tend to, I used to listen to a lot of different podcasts that I had listened to already to fall asleep. Kevin Smith did this thing with Ralph Garman about the classic Batman episodes, and they would have them playing, and so they couldn't really have the audio. They just kind of explain what was going on as it was happening.
Right.
And they would talk about it, and I would just listen to those, and they would describe it and things like that. But I listened to them over and over again, so I could just fall asleep to them. Now, at one point I was listening to a lot of Lord of the Rings lore, just falling asleep listening to it, and then I got into Star Wars lore for a little bit, just going back to 25,000 years, 26,000 years.
The narrative documentaries, podcasts of people explaining all the lore are brilliant, especially
and now I've been diving into the Marvel stuff. It's, I guess, most of the comics. It's talking about you'll go into, you know, the Secret Wars or this kind of, and I'm listening, but I'm also falling asleep. I'm not like intently listening to it.
It's a good way, like an audiobook, without having to read or whatever to get all that. I mean, I use Lord of the Rings as the perfect example, especially when they came out with Rings of Power and they were pulling stuff from the Silmarillion and stuff. It's like there's so much that people don't, that you may not know, but the people who have put that together for you. Okay, even like when Game of Thrones was on, there were people talking about the history and pulling it from his outlines of his books and all that to explain the world that you're in. And that's a great thing to be able to listen to while you're doing it.
But I'm one of those people. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm listening to podcasts on. It's not technically a podcast, is it? But that, to me, it is. I'm listening to it. I have never watched any of these videos. I'm not saying I haven't looked at them, but I'm saying I've never sat and watched them. I've only listened to them.
But when it's a video of just images with the audio is the most important part, I kind of consider that a podcast personally.
Right, and what they're doing is it's so funny because it's like it's bridging these two worlds. It's a match. So
all right, well, I'm gonna bring this to our last two questions. So I got a chance to ask the true filmmaker's question, and it is, what is the film that lit your fuse? What made you want to be a filmmaker?
This is gonna sound weird. It's gonna sound weird. What is it? I'm now spacing on the name. It's Video Game the Movie. It was a documentary. It was one of the first crowdfunded documentaries about two indie gamers racing to get their game on Xbox, and the guy shot it on DSLRs and raised, I think it was the first crowdfunded movie, and I think it played at Sundance, and it's the only thing I've ever watched like 3 times in a row. Like I literally watched it 3 times in a row. It was I'm spacing on the name. It's what is it called? Okay. Dang it. Indie Game. It's called Indie Game. Sorry, Indie Game, not Video Game. Indie Game the movie. I watched it once and I was like, oh, that's great. And I immediately wanted to watch it again. And I never do this I can't think of anything that I've immediately watched.
Right.
Like, I don't mean like a day later. I mean, I turn around and watch it right then and there again. Because the first time I watched it for the movie, the second time I watched it to kind of see what they were doing. Because cinematically, I was like, this is so cool. And then I watched it a third time just because I wanted to, not immediately, but the next day or so. And then I went and looked, and the creators had put this website. They described everything they did, what cameras they used, what gear they used, how they made it. Like, it was like a case study. They literally did a case study. And I remember, like,
only a documentarian would pick a documentary as the one that lit their fuse.
I mean, I've always loved movies. I've always loved movies, but it was the one where I was like, I want to make a movie. Like, I want to make a movie. Like, this is amazing. And they did it on these cameras that everyone can afford now. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, so it was definitely indie game. I actually ended up getting to speak with one of the filmmakers when A Fat Wreck came out, briefly, which was very cool. But yeah, that was the one that made me think that I could make a movie. And really gave a how to, like, here, this is what you can do. It's like, and I mean, I really studied their case study before I made my first movie many times. Like, I would read it in bed at night, like on my phone, just kind of going through the case study and kind of absorbing it. So Indie Game the Movie was the one that inspired me. And then I crowdfunded our film as well, you know. So I kind of used their plate, not this one, the Fat Wreck.
Well, it's a great name drop of a movie, though, and I agree with you. It's an incredible film. I have not seen it in a while.
There are scenes from that movie, like when they're going into the convention, and there's like the mist, and it looks like a science fiction, and then there's like an arch of the apartments where the sun just breaks through, and it just like these things just stuck with me. And I was like, someone did this. They didn't have a studio. They just went and did it.
Yeah.
And so I think that yeah, that was the one. Like I said, there are films that inspired me. Like I could talk about Steven Spielberg movies that inspired me, but it at no point that I ever think that I could do it. You know,
Right.
it was indie game that I was like, this is beautiful, and I thought I not to say like anyone could do it. I just mean like, oh, it was an inspiration. It was like, oh, I want to make a movie. Like I want to make a documentary. So.
But no, I'm a huge fan of gaming documentaries. Obviously, it's always fun to go back and revisit. And I did that not too long ago because interviewed Walter Day and Billy Burke and the ones that did the film King of Kong, Fistful of Quarters. But they did kind of a follow up about Walter Day, where he is now, and it just came out, and it was really fun to talk with them.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen King of Kong in probably 15 years, so I had to go back and watch that, and it was like, oh my god, this is great now. And then I got on this kick of just gaming documentaries about things that I had forgotten about the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, documentaries are always a great answer to things that'll, for a film that'll inspire you to want to be a filmmaker. But obviously, we could go on and on about Steven Spielberg movies.
So what's the? I'm curious what this last question is.
Well, this is our famous nerdy question, and I don't think it's been so long since we've interviewed you that I don't think we even asked it the last time. So here we go. If you could have a weapon of choice or a superpower from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
That's a good question.
And you are not limited to just one thing.
No, I'm trying to think of what superpower I'd even want to have. Because with great power,
right?
That's I don't know if I want that kind of responsibility.
I always love asking filmmakers because like they're prepared to talk about their film and then they just get this curveball like, what? I don't know. I gotta think. And if you have a group, then you just gotta pass it on. So I don't know. You go.
I don't know. It's let's see. I mean, what superpower would I want to have? I don't know. I think I'm a Tony Stark guy. I think I would just like to be super cool, super rich, and really fucking smart. Oh, sorry.
No, you can curse on this interview. We curse all the
time. Oh, okay. Just I wasn't sure.
We're adults.
No,
so,
I mean, to have the resources and have the brains, but I like to be Tony Stark later, not the one that's misogynistic one.
He hasn't grown up. Pepper hasn't.
Yeah, I don't need stripper poles in my private jet. So, but more when he settled down with Pepper.
You need to be the tech geek that's going to build this really awesome suit and then also solve the problem of time travel.
Yeah, I love the line. He's like, without your suit, what are you? He's like, millionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
I know. Yeah, pretty much.
No, I think I would think of like being resourceful because I think also I'm more MCU guy than a comic book guy specifically, so I don't know as much about the comics. But Iron Man 3, Shane Black, shout out. Where
he has to go to Home Depot and
where you're like Tony Stark without the money, without the tech, like he's still Tony Stark. He's able to figure it out. You know what I mean? He's to be able to be resourceful and whatever you have at your disposal, being able to figure it out.
That actually reminds me, Sam Jones. I asked him that question many years ago when we were interviewing him at a convention, and he said it's like, I don't want a superpower or anything like that. I know I'm Flash Gordon and blah, blah, blah. But I love Batman. I love that he's a detective.
Right.
At the end of the day, he is smart. He's a detective. He's figuring things out. And he has all the cool toys. He doesn't have to have superpowers. So
I don't know whether I cheat that question.
No. I don't think it's that. No, I think it's
superpower.
superheroes come in all forms, and that's the great thing about the comics is some are not going to be Superman. They're not going to be mutants or anything like that. They have to build.
I mean, if I had to go with a superpower, give me the Flash, because one, time travel, you can move around really fast, but also you can vibrate your body to move through like walls, and
Right.
so you can really the Flash has like just not super speed. It's through the super speed is able to do all these other kind of crazy things as well.
Yeah, you can go to another Earth in the DC universe.
Well, and he can vibrate through the atoms of walls and stuff. You know, like you can actually start doing some. I see, I'm a nerd.
But I mean, you've demonstrated, you're a tech nerd, and that is awesome. That,
I don't think you make a podcast documentary without being a nerd. I just don't think.
I don't.
Obsessed with something for 7 years without being some kind of nerd.
No, but I guess the question of being a nerd has completely changed, and that's why I love the show Stranger Things, and why I fell in love with it. Like I was that kid. I played sports, but I am that kid too.
Right.
And let's face it, before podcasting was on the internet, you were just the nerdy kid in the audiovisual club talking about
so true.
Yeah. And that in the end of days, when there's no internet or anything, it's just CB radio. That's how you're going to continue your podcast.
I think there's a line in the documentary. It's like, podcasting used to be for nerds.
Kind of, pretty much. All right. One last plug. Because this will be released beforehand. When is the official world premiere of Age of Audio?
World premiere. We're very lucky to be premiering at the Oak Cliff Film Festival on June 29th. 3:15 p.m. at the Texas Theater, historic Texas Theater. Tickets are available right now. Go grab some. Come hang out with us. The first 25 people who show up, we're going to give them a poster. There's really great artwork of the. If you stay with that, don't move. I got one right here. Oh gosh.
No sound the recording.
Yeah, we got this cool.
Oh,
poster.
Nice.
So this is
like classic sci-fi. I love it.
See, I've got a little pushback from some of our producers to say it's a little too sci-fi, but I like it. It's theater of the mind.
Yeah.
They got an earbud. There's a microphone. It makes sense to me.
Well, it's that nerd show approved. We like classic sci-fi, so I mean, I say stick with it. All right, so last day of the festival, Oak Cliff in Oak Cliff, Texas, at the famed Texas Theater, Sunday, June 29th, and that is. And
if you're not in the area, keep an eye out. Age of Audio, where AOA Movie is all of our stuff. AOA Movie is the Instagram, it's the TikTok, it's the website. So AOA Movie, Age of Audio Movie, AOAmovie.com. And AOA Movie. If you look for Age of Audio, any of those places, look for us. We hope to have it where people can watch it. We'll be doing after this festival. There's other festivals that we're talking with. There's screenings that we'll be setting up at different podcasts, festivals, and conferences throughout the year. And so there'll be a few chances for people to catch it. And then hopefully sometimes early next year, hopefully we can have some type of release. We don't have any news on that yet, but we're hoping.
Well, for everybody in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or even if you're traveling out of town, the Oak Cliff Film Festival is one of the best in Dallas. It's like an ongoing party at the Texas Theater, and this is the best place to see it. So I hope everybody will come out will come out during the fest that runs from June 26th through the 29th.
Yes, come out. Lots of great films. Mark Maron's, his documentary about Mark Maron is going to be there. Are we good? I saw that. I was lucky enough to see it at Tribeca just last week, and it's amazing. So definitely check that out. The director is going to be at that screening as well, the director of that film. So if I could plug another movie.
Wait, these interviews are all about shameless promotion and plugging other films in your